Hi, and welcome to my method of applying freckles. I've been perfecting them for a few years now, and it has become really popular, and it's super fun to do. Let's get started. Let's talk about skin prepping.
Not only do we need to prep the skin, but we also need to prep our tray. Here you see a restaurant grade plastic wrap that I am using as a barrier on my tray and smooth surface. I make sure that the edges are all the way down and curled under in case I need to move the tray when I have my gloves on while I'm working. All the edges are protected. Next, I take the same kind of barrier and place it over the top of the chair so that the chair is protected, which is essentially your workspace. Here are a few basic things I put on the tray for skin prepping and then also for mapping. Be a pencil, microbrush, Q-tip, and then even a cotton round with a little bit of skin antiseptic. I use Pure Cleanse. Place it on the tray.
Prepping is obviously very important, cleansing the areas that you will be applying the freckles, as well as discussing with your client a little bit of expectations, right? A little bit of time, and you obviously want the skin to be nice and clean. At this point, you can actually take a pencil and start placing them a little intuitively. Maybe they want constellations. Let's check out some freckle mapping. All right, now that you have the foundation of everything, let's go ahead and apply these faux freckles.
All right, let's set up our tray. I'm going to bag the machine and cord with the Pretty Grip ensemble here, and then we're going to put out 2 ink caps for this freckle service. These are silicone ink caps. I'm putting out a couple drops of Pure, and then I will be putting out a couple drops of Chosen. One is a bit more rich medium brown, one of them is more like a taupe. Some hypoallergenic baby wipes, and then we are going to open our needle selection. So I selected a 3 round shader as well as a 3 curved mag, as we talked about earlier. I want to check the needle length in each of these before we get started. This is the round shader, and you want to have it out approximately about a millimeter. Then we're popping this one out, and we're going to put the mag in. This is about a millimeter as well, and you're going to be using like the very tip and surface of everything, and you're not going to be going super deep. You're really etching the skin in little tiny circles, kind of scratching it as you build. So as we get started, we are using a 3-point stretch. We're using the index and thumb of our opposite hand that we're tattooing with, and the 3rd point stretch is kind of using the pinky that you're anchoring with the machine to stretch downward and stretch the cheek as much as possible. As you can see, I am building up this freckle with multiple passes. It's not necessary to get all of the pigment in all at once. You can actually come back to it once you've finished going from all the way one side to the other side. Take a look at your saturation and density and go back over them. So right now, I'm just doing little tiny circles, creating a very soft edge for a watercolor look, following our freckle design that we mapped out, and we are going to continue from the left here all the way over top of the nose. This area around the nose here is very sensitive. It is thin. It can cause just a little bit of difficulty when you implant the skin. It looks on the video like I'm doing a lot of work, but I'm staying so high in the dermis that I'm doing layers of pigment at a time, just tiny, tiny little bits, as to not deposit too much pigment all at one time. The skin is so thin that it is possible to create an oversaturation of pigment in the nose and also in the brow area. So you're gonna see me just keep building on these little freckles very, very lightly. Remember, you can always go back and do more. Less is more, modesty is key, and honestly, the softer the better, especially if you're doing these really light wash, watercolor type of freckles. I'm running my machine at about a 6 here, and as you saw, we're using a corded machine. I use the corded machine and also my wireless machine interchangeably. If you were to really study freckles, they are perfectly imperfect, right? Some are perfectly shaped, maybe that's more closely related to like a mole. And so you'll see me do a lot of different angles in shading techniques, just going back and forth or side to side, just building up the color. Ideally, I like to have sort of a soft edge around everything. So if the center has just a smidge more pigment, I'm gonna feather it out just a little bit. Some of that may fade out during healing, but that's okay. We can always build more. I'll regularly check the work that I'm doing and make sure that the density of everything looks okay, as well as the spacing. And if something needs a little something somewhere else, or if I need to be a little more dense. Sometimes different areas of the face, and when you change the face, your hand pressure might change. So it's just good to check by rotating the head of your client every once in a while to look. Here, really important, we jumped over to the far right side of the face, and I'm going to work from the right side towards the nose, so that while I'm stretching and I'm working, I'm not worried about me erasing any of those pre-drawn freckles that we did. If I were to come over top of the right side of the nose and work all the way to the right side of her face, I run a risk of erasing our painstakingly perfect laid out freckle. So right now you can see me working from the right side of the face towards the nose and just doing little tiny circles and just building up our perfectly imperfect little shapes. As you begin placing freckles in different areas of the face, you might feel like you're wanting to get a little creative and put some on maybe underneath the eyelids or on top of the eyelids. This skin is very, very thin. Just be very, very careful. The client typically will have just a little bit of like a watery eye. I mean, we're poking them a little bit, you know. But just be very gentle. You can have them look up and away as I did here, and just building very, very gently. So what I'm doing is I'm going back over to where we started because I checked density. As the pigment sits a little bit, it does oxidize, maybe gets just a little bit darker. So I just decided to go over a few of them, just a tiny little bit more to build up some pigment. Because she does have combination to oily skin, I am expecting her color to fade tremendously, but it is her first session and I love to build freckles over multiple sessions. What you see me doing right here is just cleaning off the needle a little bit. Sometimes there's a little bit of built up pigment, debris or anything like that, and you just wipe it on your wipes and dip it back in your pigment and you start again. A tiny cup with distilled water and an antiseptic cleanser will clean your cartridges really, really easily. Just stick it into the cup while the machine is running, and you can use your wipes to just help get some of the debris off. I like to do this as I'm changing out cartridges, so if I need to go back to this cartridge, there won't be anything kind of dried onto it. So we're going to pop this one off and put the round shader on. We are also going to set aside the light color and bring the darker tone on the tray closer to us. While the machine is running, you want to dip it into the pigment so that the reservoir starts to fill up just a tiny little bit. And we're going to get started with the second color. There is a little bit of a hue on her skin from our first pass with the chosen pigment. Now we're using the pure color and a little bit more of a condensed configuration with the round shader. And we're still working in very, very tight, very light circles. If we have to go over one a little tiny bit more, then that's okay. Building is key. You don't want to ever overdo it. I really like to layer freckles, right? So there might be like a wash with like a little tiny bit of a dot, a saturated dot near it. Maybe some dots are by themselves, but I'll also place like a second dot right beside it just to kind of soften up and build a little bit of dimension and texture. Look at them just starting to all come together. It's so exciting. Once you start playing with the different shapes and the densities, it really adds to the look and the authenticity of a freckle. And that's it for our first session on these beautiful freckles.
All right, so aftercare is very, very simple. You keep the area clean and dry for the most part. No excessive sweating, no excessive water on the skin. The parameters for cosmetic tattooing for the face are really the same, about sun exposure and keeping the area clean but not overly saturated with water or sweat or ointment even. You are wanting to have them clean it, maybe with a pH balanced soap like Dial, the Gold Pump, rinsing, pat dry, if necessary, using a fragrance-free lotion. If there is a little bit more of a dry skin type, you want to keep the area lightly moist with maybe a fragrance-free lotion 2 to 3 times a day, keeping the area clean as well. If there is a combination to oily skin type, I actually prefer to do maybe a one-time application if needed, maybe a second one of the fragrance-free lotion. And if you are dealing with anyone that has an oily skin type, then we want to steer clear of any ointments, just keep the area clean. And I also recommend oil blotting sheets. So oil blotting sheets would be used in the first few days up to the week of like 10 to 15 times a day in the areas. And what this will do is it'll keep the pigment in and help the bonding process, which normally an oily skin type might let a lot of that pigment go. So if you try these methods, let me know what you think in the comments.